It's a loose power cord.
Hopefully that's sounding okay.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is absolute pleasure to speak to all of you this morning, and it truly is a privilege to work as part of this community. Every day, I have the privilege of seeing all of the great things that you all are doing as community members in your various groups, organizations, nonprofits, and it truly is inspiring to me. And part of the reason why I choose to live and work in Port Angeles is I'm inspired by what you do, I'm inspired by this community, I'm inspired by the opportunities we have, and the fact that we have a very bright future. I think that's really something that is significant in that every day myself and my department see some very substantial challenges that we have to overcome. And I think it's really important that we take the time to discuss some of those challenges, that we work to problem solve on those challenges, that we work on them as a community, and that we work towards overcoming each of those challenges, and that as a community we persevere, as we've seen historically in this community, a great deal of success when perseverance is applied. So this morning I want to talk about really striking a balance in our community's future and talk about some of our environmental challenges that we have in this community, thinking about how we can address those challenges, but more importantly, some of the successes that we've already had in addressing those challenges. Also look at some of the social challenges in our community. How are we addressing those? How can we better address those? And then are there successes that we can highlight now? We also want to take a look at some of those economic challenges that we face. What are some of the solutions there? How can we fix those, and how can we improve those situations? And then I want to talk about a series of positive community changes that we've seen and some big game changer projects in town. Most importantly, we want to talk about all the reasons that this community has to celebrate and all those things that we should be sharing with our neighbors, sharing with other community members, to really pass the word along about how great things are in the city of Port Angeles. Before we jump in, I think it's extremely important that as we see these successes, those successes are yours. Those successes are not owned by the city of Port Angeles. Those successes are a result of the hard work of our local businesses, the hard work of our service clubs, the hard work of our local organizations. So first I want to talk about the environment. Some of the biggest challenges we see on a daily basis include limited land base. Port Angeles has very distinct boundaries in which we have a national park to the south, we have the Strait of Juan de Fuca to the north, and we have some Morris Creek and Elwha rivers boundarying on other sides of us. Obviously that goes beyond the city limits, but it's important to recognize that we have a limited land base. And one of the challenges that we see environmentally is a pressure on some of those land bases due to limited developable property. And we're slowly seeing that number start to decline as far as number of vacant properties available in the community, and that's something we really need to think about, because what it does is it causes pressure on areas with steep slopes, areas in proximity to the marine bluff, areas in proximity to local creek corridors, and it's really important that we think about that. We have a harbor that is currently going through a cleanup process. It's extremely important that as a community we maintain a commitment to move that project forward to ensure that at the end of the day we see completeness. That's a real challenge for us, and that's something that we will continue to work very hard on. It's important that we continue to provide public access to the shoreline. That's very much one of the primary goals of the waterfront project that you saw, is the public wanted to be given back the waterfront, be able to come and touch the water and be part of the shoreline area. We want to make sure that we're protecting some of the valuable creek corridors that we have. Again, there's some pretty significant pressures occurring on those creek corridors, most notably some of the social challenges interrelating and the fact that we are finding continually homeless camps along those creek corridors, and sometimes the treatment of those creek corridors is not in the best long-term interest of those creeks, so that's something we're continually having to work on. But our continued quality of life, I think the reason all of us choose to live in this area is we really greatly appreciate the quality of life. And the environment around us is a really big part of that quality of life, and it's important that we protect that in the long term. But we really need to also recognize the interrelatedness of the social and economic issues as they relate to some of those environmental challenges, as well as make sure that we're aware of some of those local systems. Thanks, Mark. So as far as some successes, we have a really good shoreline master program that goes a long way to protecting some of those issues that we talked about previously. I feel that we're doing a good job with critical area protection in town. We have over 48 Shoreline Environmental Policy Act and SEPA documents that we process on an annual basis, and all of those work towards protecting those environmental areas. We also foster the success of the nearshore environmental improvements, and that we've had a lot of work and engagement with Farrow Marine Life Center and others to protect the nearshore environment and make sure those improvements are benefiting the shoreline area and the habitat that exists in the shoreline. It's also important to recognize stormwater management as a success. I know it's been extremely challenging to receive some state-mandated permits relative to our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, but one of the benefits and the successful outcomes that's come out of that is we no longer need to worry about non-point source pollution. We know where that stormwater is flowing, we know where the outfalls are, and we now have it pinned down what some of those sources are, and that's a benefit so that we know where stormwater is going. Thanks, Mark. Some other environmental successes to highlight are the fact that we are working towards clustering development away from some of those creek corridors. Mount Angeles View is a great example of that, where we saw clustering of housing away from the Peabody Creek corridor. The reserve at Valley Creek actually illustrates an example of clustering away from the Valley Creek corridor, but also providing open space as part of those projects and some environmental protection. We have additional work to do through code compliance, but we've had some pretty big successes with code compliance in the creek corridors, both in Valley Creek and along Ennis Creek. We continue to see an excellent job in the community by the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary, Farrow Marine Life Center, and the National Park Service on education of our young people, and that's extremely important to the future of our community's environment. The North Olympic Land Trust has done a phenomenal job of preserving unique ecosystems as well as agricultural land in the community, and that's really important to the future of our environment. I found it really interesting that Puget Soundkeeper and Washington Environmental Council recognized Port Angeles as one of only 12 jurisdictions in the entire state that gets a score of 5 out of 5 when it comes to environmental stewardship. They scored based on softening footprint, building with care, improving infiltration, growing the right trees, and maintaining buffers. Port Angeles received a 5 out of 5, and there's not very many cities that can claim it. Success, really, in our community will stem from recognizing that we have local needs. Recognizing that when we see federal and state rules passed along to us, we need to do a creative solution that fits the local need and doesn't just follow through with the state or federal mandate, but we're really respecting what that local need is, recognizing we are a very unique location with a unique environment. Some of our social challenges, these are ones that are really perplexing, but next slide, please. We really need to work collectively on some solutions for attainable housing in the community, relative to homelessness, alcohol and drug abuse, mental health support, poverty. It's important to remember that these issues are extending nationwide. They're not Port Angeles problem alone, but it is important that we have perseverance, innovation, time, and commitment dedicated to working through those challenges. And I'm very optimistic about what I have seen in this community coming together to work towards some of the successes, which we'll go ahead and talk about. From a housing perspective, and thinking about housing, we've seen over 132 new dwelling units receiving building permits in 2016 and 2017. That's a big number for our community, and we're outpacing the growth of our population. That's a step in the right direction relative to protection of housing. We have improved awareness and acknowledgement of our challenges in the community, everything from our local drug abuse problems to homelessness. We have better awareness, and we have elected officials working on those issues locally and making substantial improvements. We've seen a substantial investment in the capacity and capability at Olympic Medical Center, Peninsula Behavioral Health, Olympic Healthcare Network, and TAFE to accommodate some of the social needs and challenges that we're experiencing. And it's important that our community leaders are actively meeting, engaging, and regularly tackling some of these really difficult issues. Next slide, please. Some of the additional social trends that we have made successes in are Port Angeles Municipal Code changes. And Allison Brecky here, our planning manager, is very much behind some of the success of these changes. But embracing accessory dwelling units so that it's easy for a homeowner to put an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard. That we're modifying our medium and higher density zones to accommodate additional growth. Through code changes that Council approved last year that Allison Brecky put forward, we've increased the buildable square footage in our medium and high density zones by 1,160 square feet. That's a pretty big number when you're trying to pencil out a project on some of those lots. We also have a series of overlays that really provide for flexibility. Some of those require attainable housing, some of those require affordable housing, but many of them allow just a great deal of flexibility that can also work towards addressing some of our social challenges. So this is a bit promotional, this slide right here, and the job fair is going to be extremely important, and it's part of one of the solutions we need to our economic challenges. The local economy is doing much better than it was in the past, but we have some big issues that we need to tackle for the long term. One of the biggest ones that is most notable is our economic leakage, that we're not doing the best job we could possibly do to make sure we're utilizing our local supply chain, nor are we necessarily doing the best job we could do choosing local, and we need to do better than that. We're still seeing a great deal of leakage in our economy. We continue to see a hiring disconnect, where we hear from employees that there are not enough employees out there to hire. We hear from employees who want to go to work that they can't find a job, and we need to bridge that disconnect, and many businesses locally are already working on it, and we greatly appreciate that there are a lot of services out there working on it as well. The median wage is something that we also need to greatly improve. If you look at Port Angeles, one of the biggest disadvantages we have is our median wage. We are right up there as far as quality of life and a number of other issues, but when it comes to median wage, we have a lot of work to do. I think it's really important that we're importing a great deal of services right now in the contracts that get executed in this community, and we really need to work towards long-term training to really build the capability from within in this community to make sure we can tackle some of those bigger projects. We really need to work towards more private sector projects, less governmental and nonprofit projects, to have more of a balance when it comes to the growth of the community. I think it's important to note that these issues are a lot more unique to our community than some of the environmental and social issues that I mentioned. But again, you really need to follow through with solutions that have a commitment to youth, so that when our youth grows up, they have an ability to see a change, to see a different world economically, and make sure that we're also defending the local interests and embracing change so that we can have a successful economy at the end of the day. So one of the really exciting successes that we see is the job fair, and this is something that a lot of people have put a great deal of effort and work into for this year. And I'm really excited to see that a great deal of our larger businesses are going to be participating in this, and that's a big part of bridging the gap between the employers and the employees, finding ways to make those connections. But it's a step in the right direction, and we'll hope that your businesses can participate on March 21st. We'll also, there's a number of local companies that have publicly announced a dedication to improving the median wage in this community. Angeles Millworks has made a concerted effort to really improve their wages and make a change, as well as Airborne ECS. Those are steps in the right direction, and we greatly appreciate their dedication to paying good wages. If you look at some of our economic trends, we're still making some good progress on bringing down our overall unemployment. We've seen a 4% decrease over the last 7 years. We're continuing to see in our department at the Community Economic Development Department a very nice flow of certificates of occupancy, 83% of which reflect new businesses in the community. This past year we saw about $26 million in new construction value and about 767 new permits in 2017. That is a very healthy number. If you look back at record setting, the record setting year was 810 in 2007. So we're right up there with some of the peak years for Port Angeles. That's especially surprising when you know that this was also the year that we implemented the NPDES Stormwater National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Stormwater Program, which was very difficult for many contractors to navigate, but we're working through that daily, and I think we're doing a good job of moving that forward and seeing some good progress. I wanted to drill down a bit on those certificates of occupancy, because one of the things that was surprising to me is how we consistently are seeing really good, unique businesses. And I think that's something that's really exciting. We see a lot of small-scale private offices and consulting firms that never make the radar. We may not see them in our retail core or the commercial corridor, but they're out there, and we're seeing some new relocations here, and that's a good thing. Some examples of some of those new ones that we saw in 2017, at the Park Inn, Bada Bloom downtown, Dog Days, which is a new C Street restaurant, Rodiker Woodworks, and Super Saver Foods. Next slide, please. Some additional economic trends. In 2017, we once again saw a record year in tourism. The tourism economy is thriving in Port Angeles, and once again we saw a record revenue month in October of $138,000. That's the second year in a row where we've seen record numbers come in 1 month. What I thought was more important is looking at the off-season, what typically isn't really the peak tourism season, and I'm just noting the increase in the month of December, where we saw a 45% increase over the last 5-year average in tourism. That's really exciting. We truly have made some substantial changes there. We still have work to do from a quality perspective, as well as developing our tourism product, but that's exciting to see that growth. Some additional positive community changes. Airborne ECS is a great reason to celebrate. We greatly appreciate a local individual coming back and reinvesting and taking pride in his own community. That's really exciting. Habitat for Humanity, we talked earlier on the announcement about Rally in the Alley and Love Your Neighborhood. That is hugely beneficial to the city of Port Angeles. When you look at some of the social challenges we have, some of the code compliance issues out there, and recognizing we have limited resource, to bring a neighborhood together, to get them all volunteering, to be a part of the cleanup effort, that's a great thing. And I can tell you the first Rally on the Alley in Port Angeles was a great event to be a part of. Mount Angeles View is a project that's underway that really will change the world as far as housing. It also will incorporate the new Boys and Girls Club as part of that location, but that's a big project for our community, provides a great deal of housing units which are desperately needed, and ultimately we really want to change the picture for affordable housing in the community, and that's a step in the right direction. I think Taffy, the Answer for Youth, has done a phenomenal job of really embracing, showing compassion for all of those in our community, and providing capacity to really reach out and help those in our community that have a need. And then I'm really excited to see all of our business organizations, our Chamber of Commerce, our EDC, all working together to be successful here in this community. And we're seeing that daily.
I can't believe you didn't say PABA.
Yeah. And the PABA.
You're covered.
It was intended to be all inclusive. Some additional positive community changes. As you all know, we have a facade improvement program. It is so cool to see members of the private sector business community stepping up to invest in their facades, invest in improvements to the public realm that benefit all of us in the form of increased property values. We have two examples up here of a new facade project, the Soho Hibachi Grill, and then also Poser Yoga and Cageworks redid their facade on 8th Street. That's still a work in progress, but we're really happy that all these businesses participated in that program in 2017, and so far we've seen a pretty big investment in total property value. Some of the new events that we're seeing in the community, as well as those older events that are really thriving, are important things to share because these are really positive changes for our community. We're seeing some more wintertime events. We have 2 new swim-related events. We have a brand new CrossFit competition in town that's a new event. We have a new family-oriented Chamber of Commerce 4th of July celebration, which was really fun last year, and I'm excited to see another one again this 4th of July. Chamber of Commerce is also expanding their Ride the Hurricane, which is something to celebrate. We're having Wanda Fuca's 25th year celebration this year, and I know that's going to be very exciting for them, and they're going to do some special efforts this year because of that. And then Crab Fest is anticipating setting a new record this year with 20,000 expected for their 2018 event. Paint the Peninsula is an event that continues to thrive and grow each year. It's one of those newer events, as are Arts and Drafts in the Big Herd. Those are now going on 4 years of growth and success, and that's success we're really happy to see. Looking at some of the occupancies of long vacant spaces, I think seeing Albertsons eventually, I know it took a long way to get there, but to come back as Super Saver Foods is a great thing. To see Grosses Nursery converted to Taffy and some facade improvements done there, that's something to celebrate. Parker's Paint becoming Coyote Pub. The POE building is now Carrie's Corner, and the old liquor store. Olympic Veterinary Clinic and Olympic Veterinary Clinic's old building became Olympic Kids Dental. Really cool to see our commercial corridor have new occupancies and really change for the better. So these are really the game changers in the community that really inspire us about the future of Port Angeles. The Boys and Girls Club is so important to our community. If you think about some of those economic challenges and the fact that many people make a conscious decision not to even seek a job because they know they can't afford childcare. I'm told that right now we have over 50 families on a waiting list to get into the Boys and Girls Club, and we need to change that, we need to address it. I'm really excited to see them working on a dedicated capital campaign for their new building as part of Mount Angeles View. And it's really exciting to see that dedication, and that really will be a game changer for our community, for our local workforce, and to enable people to get back to work. Lefties Baseball was something that greatly changed our community. That investment in our community really brought our community together. I would argue that we haven't seen something like that occur in this community in decades. To bring us together in a really exciting, inspirational event, that's a great thing, and I think that's definitely something that has been a game changer for our town. We're really excited to see the work being done by the Port Angeles Waterfront Center, the dedication towards a new performing arts center, a new conference center in the downtown, to see Lower Elwha investing and moving forward with a tribal hotel on the former Mitchell property in downtown between Railroad and Front Street, as well as their waterfront longhouse that would be anticipated to be located on the Port Angeles Waterfront Center property. And then Faro and NOAA National Marine Sanctuary Facility would also be on that same Oak Street property. But to see those projects moving forward and getting put in place and implemented on that property, that's a great thing, and those will truly be game changers for our downtown area, really extending that successful season for our downtown businesses. I also want to mention William Shore Memorial Pool, because that really is a big project about the quality of life in this community. And when people are making decisions about coming to work for Olympic Medical Center, Peninsula College, the city of Port Angeles, they're looking at some of those things and deciding about whether they want to be in our community because of whether quality of life exists here. So that's a great project as well. So I want to challenge all of you to celebrate, to really celebrate the fact that Port Angeles truly is a destination from a tourism perspective, that we have access and availability to resources that enable individuals and businesses to succeed. It really is amazing if you take the time to look at the detailed list of resources that businesses have available to them here. It's a big list, and there are great resources out here, and I'm inspired by those who are out there helping on a daily basis, making sure some of those businesses succeed. I think it's important, the energy, passion, and dedication that we're seeing from local elected officials. We're really excited about that energy and passion that they're bringing to the table, and they're there because they care about the community and they want to problem solve and make the community a better place. I think we should celebrate the fact that we are seeing fellow community members work so hard and to give so much. It is inspiring to all of us, and we're really seeing that on a daily basis, giving within this community. Care and humanity shown across the board. There's a great deal of really good work going on. I think too, the businesses, the organizations, and the service clubs are making a difference in people's daily lives, and I'm excited about that. So I also want to charge all of you with sharing our success. I want you to inspire your friends and neighbors about the bright future that Port Angeles has. I want to demonstrate care and compassion and humanity. And I think that's really important that all of us are sharing and demonstrating the care and compassion and humanity to all of our neighbors in this community so that we can ultimately become a better place. It's important to communicate those positive stories about what's going on, how far we've come from where we were. It's important to recognize that working together we can make a difference. And many of you remember former PABA member Don Perry. His motto was, together we can. And I absolutely believe that, and I absolutely believe through the history of Port Angeles, we've seen this community demonstrate a together we can attitude and a together we can success. I hope that all of us are part of a constructive change, being positive about what we're doing and really making sure that we're having growth on some of the issues, but being constructive and being helpful, moving us in the right direction. And finally, I think it's important that all of you take pride in what you've accomplished for the community. Take pride in what our local businesses have accomplished for this community, because it truly is a better place, and I'm really excited about our bright future. Thank you, Mark. Be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
I own property just here, and we don't have septic. We have septic down behind there. That's about $150,000 away. We were promised that it would go to Monroe Road. Well, somebody changed it, and it's not there. We can't develop it. The trailer court behind me, behind my property, wants me to buy that trailer court. There is no septic there. Just septic tank. There is no sewer. So why would I want to go buy more property that I can't use? Why did the city and the county not give us septic? Can you answer that?
I don't know that I can fully answer that question, but I would be more than happy to look into it for you. I am aware that I believe sewer is probably quite close, and that it's probably the primary line on Highway 101. But absolutely, that's something that we can take a look at and determine how far away it is and see if there are opportunities to work towards getting it there. But I think that ultimately it may be really helpful to have a cooperative approach with multiple property owners to extend it to that location. But I can't say I'm familiar with some of our infrastructure lines, including the sewer lines, particularly outside the city limits. I do know it is a newer line, and there were contemplated additional lines that extend lateral from the main 101 line. But at that point, I suppose it could still be on 3rd Avenue as well.
Well,
But I'd be happy to look at that in
yeah,
detail.
we
if
were
you
all
want to.
in compliance with trying to get it up there because the trailer court, there was a restaurant there then before it burned down. A lot of us. Now we have to come up and cross the highway. Cross the highway is $175,000. They won't do it for any less. It has to go underneath the highway.
That's a big number, but I'd be happy to explore that with you. John?
Thank you so much for your encouragement, upbeat presentation. It was a pleasure to hear the successes that the city has had. I have a question regarding the growth of the city plans in both the east and west area. Has been any discussion about when and if that might happen?
As in expansion into the urban growth areas?
Annexation.
That's a little bit difficult to predict, and I think in fairness to some of our new council members, we really need to take the time to fully understand what the new council members' intended direction might be for that. But I will tell you that presently that is not an item in our 2018 work plan. That right now we have a great deal of work to do within the jurisdictional boundaries that we currently have right now. And right now we're probably not keeping up with that. So I'm not anticipating that we're going to be moving in that direction, probably at least in the next few years.
Thank you.
Okay. Question about the harbor and our waterfront, both the challenges and upside. On the challenge side, the harbor cleanup, how, if you were to gaze into your crystal ball, how you see that playing out both time-wise and cost-wise for city and local businesses through utility assessments, taxes. On the upside, the remaining 40% of our waterfront improvement project, city pier, prospects for that, or are we probably most likely done given our resources? And also Edis Hook, not just access, but looking at what was apparently there long before I came here 40, 50 years ago, which has kind of shriveled down, but there's a huge opportunity just in terms of location and natural beauty for having things like boat rentals and the dive park and possibly restaurants or other things that would draw people out there. Do you see that looking out 10 or 20 years, or is that really not on the horizon?
You know, I'll tackle the last one first, and I think it always surprises me that we have groups that come out and they take it upon themselves to make a place better. And I think that that's a great possibility with Edis Hook, is that we may see another entity come out and truly change what Edis Hook is like and improve the value of the experience as you're going out on the hook. Obviously the city itself has some work to do. We have some buildings that we need to improve out there on Edis Hook. But I do think the future would suggest, as well as the public input that we've received, illustrates a strong desire to see more activity and more utilization of Edis Hook, and I do think that's really important. I think the question of how to get there is a little bit more of an issue that we need to talk about and figure out a good path forward for. Regarding the waterfront project, you're right, it very much is dependent on funding, and we're constantly looking for grant opportunities. I think there will be some grant opportunities likely coming up this year for us to go after that hopefully provide some funding for what would be the third phase of the waterfront project. Obviously we want to see a continuation of the Railroad Avenue improvements. We want to see a continuation of the improvements to the city pier area, which is in desperate need. It's exciting that Parks and Recreation is getting the floats in. That's a step forward, but we have a lot more work to do as far as some of the infrastructure that needs desperate improvement on City Pier. And then as far as the harbor, I'm really positive that, from the City of Port Angeles' perspective, that is something that we want to see move forward. We want to see finality to that project, and we do want to see ultimately the harbor clean. And I think the city is committed to making sure that moves forward on a progressive path that really is exceeding any historic cleanup in the Port Angeles area, with the exception of perhaps Penn Fly. John?
Nathan, very good presentation. You're going to be posting this, right, at the city website in the future?
Absolutely.
Okay, could you comment a little bit on what are the negotiations, how are things going between you and the tribe on the downtown hotel?
So I understand that this project is moving forward. I'm really excited about the fact that the hotel downtown is moving forward by the tribe. I cannot speak for the tribe, but what I can tell you, I would always encourage anyone in this community to really take their time to do their due diligence before they purchase any property. And I greatly appreciate any property owner or potential property owner that is taking the time to do that. And we want to give them the time to make sure that that can be done right, and that they have a full understanding of what they're buying and what they're moving forward with. That's important to me, and it's important for any property transaction. But I'm very confident it's moving forward, and I'm excited about it. Steve?
This is an incredibly bright and generous community, and a lot of the things that we're celebrating are independent efforts. One of the problems, one of the challenges that we have here, we're independent. Is there an effort to help that part of the supply chain so that efforts are not duplicated, so that organizations that want to do something know about other organizations that may already be doing those kinds of things? Does the city have a role in that?
I certainly believe that the city has a role in it, but I think that it's a much broader group. And obviously I think we have, as I mentioned, the resources in this community are great from an economic development and business perspective. And I think those resources have an opportunity to tackle some of those bigger issues and really focus a little bit more on the supply chain and figure out how we can do a better job. But I also want to give credit to many of the businesses out there that are already doing that. I mean, there are a number of businesses who have probably truly examined that already and seen what they can do to enhance the supply chain usage of local businesses, or create new businesses themselves that resolve an issue they were previously having to go to the I-5 corridor to obtain. Yes?
Does the city have an earthquake plan with all this new building? It's right in the path of potential for
We do have an emergency operations plan at the City of Port Angeles. We're in the process of supplementing that with a continuity of operations plan that ensures we also have continuity in such an event. But the fire chief at the City of Port Angeles, Ken DeVue, I know he could give you a much better, more detailed answer on exactly how that plan is implemented and how it works.
Nathan?
Jack?
What's the status on the Red Lion, or do you know? Is there anything we can talk about on that?
I don't have an update on that, but I look forward to an update, and again, I'm optimistic that we'll see something positive happen there.
It was purchased by Bugsy Patel. He purchased all 14 of their sold properties, and that's the last update I've received on it.
Who's he associated with?
He's an owner in the hospitality industry. He's pretty well known. I don't know the name of the association he owns, but they look after, I think, over 50 hotels on the West Coast.
Okay.
So kind of a big player in the game, and I do think that they're going to be a formidable competition for myself and probably for the other hotels around here as well.
So it has been purchased.
It has absolutely been purchased.
Yes and no. Interesting.
Could you explain the difference between affordable housing and attainable housing and what the city, what's the view of what's going to happen in the next 5 years in terms of this area?
Absolutely. So affordable housing is more of the federal definition where we're truly trying to look at those federally defined low-income individuals and provide housing for them. Attainable housing, from my perspective, and it's defined by city code in our infill overlay zone, is really there to make sure that we have attainable housing for the workforce. It's not just those individuals who are low income, but the standard workforce level individual in town, making sure that they have affordable housing as well. Dick, I think that probably the best answer for that is we recognize a great need, and we need to figure out what we have on the ground. And one of our work plan items this year is a housing needs assessment, really taking a look at what is the reality on the ground. How many of our housing units in town are actually unoccupied? Why are they unoccupied? Is it a snowbird situation? Is it a vacation rental? Is it an inherited property that is being underutilized? What is the reality on the ground? Doing some windshield surveys, some inventory there, and really ground truthing what facts exist and how we can better address some of those needs in the future. We want to determine whether tourism is a potentially competing interest, but also recognizing that's something that those vacation rentals are also providing, in many cases, a quality experience for some of our tourists coming to town, and we want to preserve those as well. Matthew?
So not being willing to shy away from putting my ignorance on display, the city was going through and you're going to purchase like basically the eyesore properties and flip those or something along those lines. How's that program working out?
Slowly is probably the best way to say it, but it is really important that that is the type of thing that we want to proceed with slowly and carefully. We don't take it lightly that we're put in a position where we have to condemn property. That's not something we want to be doing. But I will tell you that in that particular instance, it is a result of years of a great deal of staff resources being dumped into getting one property owner to turn around their situation because they're impacting their neighborhood. The neighbors in that community are impacted daily. They have to look at it. They have to watch vermin coming in and out of the property. They have to see the garbage next door. It's not okay, and we have to find a way to fix it. And in that particular instance, we tried everything from fines to taking it to court, and we weren't successful, and this is a last resort effort. So my hope is we don't have to do the blighted property condemnation process very often, but I can tell you we have some of those situations where a neighborhood is being impacted, the property owner is not being responsive, and we simply have to find a way to move that forward for the betterment of the community. John?
Can you give us a report on the Rainier site?
Time for the tough questions.
You know, it's probably, John, better that I don't try to do that. I don't know that I'd have the latest and most correct facts on that, but obviously I like to highlight some of the good on the Rainier site. I like to highlight the fact that we now have an Olympic Discovery Trail going directly through the site, which we didn't have previously. I'd like to highlight the fact that the city was able to purchase 14 acres of the Rainier site for the CSO project. We no longer have CSO overflows occurring there. Those are big positive steps forward, and I see more of those positive steps in the right direction coming in the future. I'm really excited about the potential restoration of Ennis Creek moving forward, and I think that's one that that will be another one of those positive steps forward on the Rainier site, but not necessarily the complete turnaround of the Rainier site like we'd all like to see.
What's the deal with the Ennis Creek? Is the city gonna be handling that?
That's something that's been in the works for a long time. You may remember there was a broad group of parties, including Rainier, Lower Elwha, City of Port Angeles was represented. But it was a pretty broad group, I want to say about 10 different entities came together and actually did a restoration plan for Ennis Creek. And since that time, it's been promoted through the lead entity group as one of the priority creek restoration projects.
Is there funding for that, or is it just still
No
waiting?
funding yet.
It's still waiting. Okay.
Steve?
Anticipated city growth, are we still estimating at about 1/3% per year?
That's still about right, although I anticipate that that's going to change. I think that the awareness of Port Angeles has really grown. There are a great deal more people coming to our front counter, inquiring about investment in properties here. The pressures that I mentioned on some of our critical areas in town, that is a direct result of we're seeing properties where previously people have ruled out, but now we're seeing people who very much want to make an investment in our town. They're not finding a great deal available, and so they're trying some of those properties that are a little bit trickier to develop.
Related to that question, how real are the lines on a map between the city and the UGA and the unincorporated county as far as what you're talking about, people not being able to find the property they want the city either to live in or start a business? Are those folks just moving into the UGA or a little bit further out, or is it for zoning or other reasons just not feasible, and either they find something in the city or they go somewhere else?
Well, at this point, I would say you still can find a great deal of property in the city. There were hundreds of lots developed in approximately 2007 in subdivisions. Many of those remain undeveloped, and so there's a lot of opportunities still there to invest. But I think absolutely we're seeing good investment in our urban growth areas. I think the county's seeing good numbers from a permit perspective. So is the city of Sequim. So I think everybody is getting a good fair share of growth.
Any other questions? All right. Well, join me in giving Nathan a round of applause. Once again, we thank you so much, Nathan. It was very informative, and I'm glad I was here. And thank you for coming. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is not 8:30, but that's okay. We don't have to stick around till 8:30. We can leave early. Next week is going to be Courtney Nestler, a friend of mine. She's also on my board of directors, talking about how social media can help improve your businesses. So I invite you to come. That's her job, is she does social media for people. So anyway, I invite you to come back next week, and without further ado, we are adjourned.